Welcome to Digital Asset News. Take the top stories in cryptocurrency and digital assets and break it down into bite-sized pieces. Today we're going to go over a piece from Robert Kiyosaki, the Rich Dad Poor Dad author. And he says Bitcoin is going to rise to $75,000 by 2023 as the U.S. economy is dying. And this leads us to the big question, which is the U.S. economy actually dying? Because the S&P 500 is up, the NASDAQ is up, and the Dow Jones is actually up. So what gives? So we're going to have to take a look at a piece from CNBC where economist Steven Davis from the University of Chicago lays everything out and talks about the jobless report, how things are going to come together and actually fall apart over the next 6 months to 18 months. And finally, the Digibyte founder steps down, slams greedy crypto culture, and how this piece is actually going to lead me to probably invest into Digibyte. And at the very end, we'll go over scam of the day and the updates, but we'll leave that for the very last piece. Let's jump into today's stories. So before we move on, let's take a look at the market, what's going on. It is the May 17th, about 12:45 Texas time, and it looks like Bitcoin is making a little surge. It might actually break 10,000. Who knows? 97.36, very nice. Ethereum 206, XRP 20. And everything looks like a very nice big green day. So nothing really is jumping parabolic wise. We'll see how everything goes. However, Digibyte took a little bit of a dip, probably from news that the founder is stepping down. But in actuality, is he really? We'll go over that at the very last part. Let's break into today's top story. So first up, Robert Kiyosaki, the Rich Dad Poor Dad author, talks about what's going to happen with the U.S. economy, and he's pretty worried. Talks about how Bitcoin will go to $75,000. And really what it comes down is to this tweet, which I will just bring up right quick. And he states, economy dying, Fed is incompetent, next bailout, trillions in pensions, hope is fading. Bought more gold, silver, Bitcoin, gold at 1,700, predict 3,000 in 1 year. Silver at 17, predict 40 in 5, and Bitcoin at 800, predict 75,000 in 3 years. Pray for the best, prepare for the worst. And I couldn't agree more. There was an actual statement from a subscriber, and he talked about the new savings account should be gold, silver, Bitcoin. And I couldn't agree more. If you grew up and learned the lesson of just saving your dollars and putting into a savings account, we actually realize now how bad of advice it actually is, because with inflation, that is our second tax. So if we just sit money into our savings account, it's really not doing anything. It's definitely not appreciating and actually going down. So if we can have gold, silver, Bitcoin as the new savings motto, I can totally get behind that. So what he's talking about here is the same thing that we talked about in a video that we did a couple of weeks ago, where Robert pretty much laid out what's going to happen with the economy, how it's all going in shambles, and how the top 1% are propping everything up to do probably or potentially a big exit scam. Now, I'm not a big tinfoil hat conspiracy theorist, but a lot of the things that he said in that video made a ton of sense. And one of the things in particular was about pensions and baby boomers, and it has me dreadfully concerned about what could potentially happen with that, because things are all interconnected. So if you got time, I'm going to link this at the very end. Definitely check out that video. Pretty interesting. But back to the actual story. Scroll down here. Talks about the latest data supports the author's assessment that the economy is not faring well. In April, retail sales fell 16.4%, while manufacturing output posted a record-breaking 13.7% decline. That's a ton. Also, the Federal Reserve expects the U.S. economy to tank by the end of the second quarter. So right now, January, February, March, that's our first quarter. Now, April, May, June, that'll be the end of the second quarter. So looking around July is when the Fed expects everything to tank. Investment analyst Sebastian Sienkiewicz explains that the central bank looks at key monthly economic data to forecast a 48% annualized plunge in the U.S. gross domestic product in the second quarter of 2020. That, my friends, is not a very good picture. Lastly, it states Kiyosaki has been sounding the alarm over the economy since the pandemic erupted. Last month, he stated the U.S. government is printing $10 trillion in order to save the country. Kiyosaki added that Bitcoin will go parabolic once the U.S. dollar enters bear territory. I like that last part. That's the only good part about this whole article, and it kind of pains me just to say it, but what I'm going to show you next is going to make you realize how bad it actually could potentially be. So this was a video on Friday. It was from CNBC, and this is economist Steven Davis from the University of Chicago. And he's going to talk about not just what's going on with the economy as far as layoffs, but what's going to happen in the actual future with the advancement of technology and how things are never are not going to come back to normalcy anytime soon. And it kind of got me to thinking about what could potentially happen with everyone around me as the economy starts to tank. So let's take a listen.
Do you think that this job loss will be permanent?
It's great to be with you. Well, you cited the 42% figure. We got that in two parts. First, we surveyed firms in April and asked them, what fraction of your layoffs do you say are permanent? And that number was 23%. A recent household survey by the Washington Post actually got the same number. But then we did something else. We looked back, and historically we said, of the layoffs that firms and workers thought were temporary when they happened, how many actually led to recalls? And a good chunk of them never led to recalls. So we put that historical evidence together with the survey evidence from April to come up with our 42% estimate.
Right. Now I could see.
Okay, so 42% estimate. And again, this is just an estimate, but it takes a look and kind of tells you where things are going or the direction that the economy is actually happening into. And this is actually plays into the Goldman Sachs. They did an article, or actually this was CNN Business, but they reference Goldman Sachs, how they issue a warning about the U.S. economy. And the unemployment rate spiked. They state here, unemployment rate spiked to 14.7% in April as the economy lost more than 20 million jobs. And I believe now, correct me if I'm wrong, I think it's around 33 to 36 million jobs that have been lost. Goldman Sachs previously predicted the unemployment rate would peak at 15%. They have since updated that. And they talk about the so-called real jobless rate, which captured the percentage of Americans who want a job but have given up trying to find one, surged to 22 or 23% in April, which was up from just 8.7% the month before. Goldman Sachs warned Wednesday that the real jobless rate will peak at 35%, up from the bank's previous projection for a peak of 29%. And as we go through this next piece, you're going to see exactly why this could happen. And it was something that I really didn't think about until I heard it from Steven Davis. So let's take a listen.
Back during 08, 09, a lot of the jobs that went away maybe wouldn't come back because you had a housing bubble and the bank sector was enormous, Wall Street. But in this case with the pandemic, why should it have the same effect? Why shouldn't it be the case that these job losses will prove temporary as people start to go back, return to their daily lives, so to speak?
Well, two big reasons. First, this idea that we're going to go into a deep freeze, and then when the thaw happens, we're all going to go back to things as it were. I think that idea has got serious problems and is partly wrong. We can see that in the kind of demand shifts that have already happened. Businesses are doing a lot less travel than they were before the pandemic. They're not going to go all the way back to where they were anytime in the near future. Airline travel is down more than 90% from a year earlier. The airline industry isn't going to come back to those levels in the near future. That's a lot of lost jobs.
So two things about that. First of all, we did a video a couple weeks ago where we took a look at Warren Buffett, and he was at his annual meeting for Berkshire Hathaway, and he revealed that he was dumping all of his airline stocks, not just a percentage, half, 75%, 90%, 100% of all his airline stocks he dumped. And he talked about how it was in the billions of dollars. I believe it was like $8.6 billion that he had to dump. And he realizes what's going to go on. Now, if you take a look even closer home, when we went to Rio, one of the people that was with us on the trip, I forgot his name, but we'll just call him Dave the pilot. And Dave was doing freight pilot services in Anchorage, Alaska. And I believe he was working for Amazon or one of those bigger companies. Anyhow, he had just gotten a job with one of the major retail or commercial airlines. And when everything came about, because we were there when the coronavirus was just pretty much hitting the States and kind of becoming the pandemic that it is today, he told us, he said, you know what, I cannot take that job. Because what's going to happen is people aren't going to fly. They're going to start to furlough all the airlines and definitely the pilots because there's not going to be enough trips to go on. So if I took that job, I would just be missing out. So I'm not going to take it. And I said, Dave, it'll be okay. He's like, nope, you don't understand. He goes, it's going to happen and it's going to be years before we get back to it. And it took me a while to understand what he said, but now that I see things playing out, I get it. I totally understand, and he made the right choice to stay working on freight, working for Amazon, and made a lot of sense. So as we see, going back to normalcy is not going to be at the flick of a switch. It's going to take a long time, and we're going to go into even deeper detail talking about telemedicine and technology and how it's going to disrupt everything moving forward.
And then within sectors, like let's say healthcare, there's going to be big shifts. We've already seen a move to telemedicine, which is quite new in the US scene. Mm-hmm. That's not going to reverse. Some medical clinics, some doctors will be very adept at meeting the demand for telemedicine, customer preferences to avoid disease transmission risks, and others weren't. So we'll see a lot of shifts of that sort. There'll be a shift away from dine-in restaurants towards takeout and delivery. It's already happened, and some of it will stay in place.
Now,
there's one other thing to keep in mind. Yeah, one other thing to keep in mind is in the past, when we had temporary layoffs, most of them came back within 2 months, the ones that came back. But this pandemic recession looks like it's going to go on much longer than that. And that means many of those so-called temporary layoffs will never result in recalls.
The thing about your...
And it's true. So I can see exactly how this is happening. Now, as you know, I am a registered nurse, non-practicing. I was a medic in the Army, became an RN. And I can just tell you, working for home health for years and years and years, we used to use telemedicine. And it was the next big thing, and it was supposed to be awesome, and it was supposed to cut down on cost. And guess how many people used it? Zero. Just about zero. There was a couple of our patients that actually did it, but I can tell you right now, nobody wanted to use it because they're like, why would I have to use this? I can just go to my doctor. I just go to my therapist, and I don't need this telemedicine. It's very cumbersome and difficult to use, so why would I keep doing it? However, now that we see that there's actually a reason. So the question is, would you take your mom or father to a crowded doctor's office with other sick people all over the place for a follow-up or a checkup or something that's non-life threatening? Or would you do something like telemedicine where you can just go on the computer, you can just plug in, go to the doctor's office, and they can have a video conference. They can do the things they need to do. And in telemedicine, they even supply you with pulse ox, which is a pulse oximeter, which checks the oxygen saturation. It has a little cuff that you can take the blood pressure, temperature, all that good stuff. So would you do it? Would you take somebody in just to take somebody in? Or would you do this telemedicine? And the same thing with restaurants. Would you go these days and sit down at a crowded restaurant with people all over the place? Or would you say, you know what, I'm just going to use Grubhub, or I'm going to use Dine or Dash, or whatever the things that are out there, and get some type of food and bring it home, and then I don't have to deal with that? I think as time goes on, me personally, I will probably want to get out of the house, but it won't be as much as I used to do, me and my wife, because of what has happened with the pandemic itself. So let me know in the comment section what you think you would do. And my last point is this. If you can see what's going to happen, and you can see all these different technological innovations which are going to eliminate jobs, for every job that is eliminated, you can also create another job on the back end. So there are jobs right now that we don't even realize what are going to be created. So for example, 30 years ago, no one would have ever thought about, we're going to need a web designer that can build it from like a full stack web designer, or we need somebody who is adept in Facebook ads, or we need somebody who knows exactly about SEO or search engine optimization. So as technology takes us into different forefronts, you're going to see other jobs being created while other jobs are being lost. Now, I don't think it's a 1-to-1 ratio, but for those people who can adapt, I think this is a very exciting time. Anyhow, last part here is, and he's going to ask this, and this is the question that I've actually asked my friends and family is, why would people come back to their job if they're getting more money on unemployment? Let's take a listen.
The unemployment insurance one that you mentioned. A new study by some of my colleagues finds that if you look at the bottom 1/5 of wage earners, they're getting paid twice as much on for unemployment benefits as they were paid when they were working. Now, you don't need a PhD in economics to figure out that's a very strong disincentive to going back to your old job, and it's a very strong disincentive to move to a new job if your old job's not coming back. That kind of policy discourages and delays this reallocation process we need. Don't get me wrong, there's an important role for unemployment insurance benefits to help those workers who have lost their job. But paying them more to not work than to work is not a very good idea in my view. Likewise, let's take the way the U.S. government has responded to the airline industry problem. Right now, the U.S. government is paying the airlines to keep their employees on payroll till October. Well, newsflash, the airline industry is not coming back to where it was in October. So as soon as October rolls around, there's two choices. Either taxpayers continue to pay airline employees not to work, or there's going to be large layoffs in the airline industry. That's just delaying the kinds of reallocation that we need.
And that's what I'm trying to say. Even though we have the traditional markets who are propped up on, I believe, what's hopium, I do not see these types of gains to last for much longer, especially when we get into quarter 3, quarter 4, and who knows what's going to happen in the future. But I can just tell you this, just like we talked about, there's going to be jobs losses, but as technology starts to take over, especially with blockchain technology, especially like decentralized finance, supply chain, other things that Bitcoin and cryptocurrency digital assets can do in the background, even talking about smart contracts, I think it's going to be a boom for people who can actually see the relevance and the ability for things to move forward and invest in those types of advancements. So let me know what you think in the comment section below. Let's move on to the last article. And last up, this kind of tricked me a little bit. This is from Cointelegraph. Digibyte founder steps down, slams greedy crypto culture. Jared Tate, founder of Digibyte, has announced he is stepping down from his daily operation, accusing the crypto community of becoming co-opted and eroded by greed and warning of centralization. Tate's announcement comes shortly after Digibyte rallied by 900% in roughly 6 weeks. And I asked the community, everybody who listens to the videos, I said, why is Digibyte going up so much? Because it hasn't done anything in like 2 years. And apparently there's some type of government contract. I don't think it's with the United States government, but other governments. They're talking about using Digibyte, and there was a big boom as far as the increase in price for Digi. So thanks for everybody who let me know about that. But here's the thing. If the Digibyte founder is going to step down, first of all, is he really stepping down? And second of all, what could that potentially do as a founder or somebody as big as Tate actually drops? So this, I had to take a look at his actual tweets. And it's a very long, drawn-out one, so I'm just going to give you the ones that I think are important. So this is the very first one. He says, I started this blockchain journey 8 years ago with a belief and a hope of a brighter future for all of us in a dark time. Along the way, I learned I have some humbling lessons. Number one, greed is fundamental, driving force in crypto, and that's just greed everywhere. It's not like it's just in crypto, it's everywhere. And then the third one he talks about, he says, all 90% of the people care for is cashing out when a coin moons. And I got to tell you, he's right. I am no different. I am not here to totally be on the ideological side of it. When these coins or when my assets start to actually go out, I'm going to sell a little bit. That's how it is. Now, if my mortgage company and my grocery store and everything else starts to take Bitcoin or XRP and everything else, I will pay in that. But as of right now, I have to pay bills, so that's how it works. Now, I do believe in the ideological part and that things will actually move, but I have to be a realist at some point. So I agree with what he's saying, but there is a reality side of that. Anyhow, next part he says, I cannot count the amount of people I've had over the last half decade stabbing in the back and attempt to use me and or Digibyte for a quick buck. Even close friends and confidence, it gets old. And yeah, no one here likes to actually have that happen. And usually what it comes down to is the more money you have, the more problems you have. So this is just par for the course, and I can understand exactly what he's saying. He says, I personally know many people who have made millions off Digibyte, cashing out and left without ever giving back, helping to grow the ecosystem. Yes, nothing requires them to do so, but the rampant pillage of the fruits of labor, and sure, of course this is going to happen. And the last two parts are the crux of the whole conversation. And he states, this does not mean I am leaving Digibyte forever, but it does mean I will be focusing on using open source Digibyte tech to build some commercial applications on my own. I'll also be taking some time off from social media, taking a well-earned break. And he says, thanks you to everyone who supports and believes in Digibyte. It is your turn to take over the reins and guide Digibyte to new levels. A decentralized project must stand on its own merit, not its founders' opinions. So that's a pretty big statement. It's a pretty big statement for the actual founder to step down and go, okay, this business is bigger than me, and I realize that, so I'm just going to let someone else take the reins, and it'll be fine. So when I first heard that, the first thing I thought about was Steve Jobs and Apple. And I thought, Apple pretty much crumbled, not crumbled, but it had a decline for many years while he stepped down. Now, when he came back, everything started to ramp up and it became the juggernaut that it is today. So I thought that is one aspect. But if you take a look at founders and how it really doesn't matter, take a look at McDonald's. I mean, it was the two brothers who started out in California, and there was just some guy named Ray Kroc who came along and said, this is a pretty good idea, and he pretty much put him out of business. And you can watch the video on Netflix. It's pretty interesting, but there was still a founder in place. But then if you take a look at Bitcoin itself, there is no founder. It's a person, it's a guy, it's a girl, it's a group of people. Nobody knows, Satoshi Nakamoto, and he just wrote a white paper, and it became a global phenomenon, and it worked out pretty well. So that might be what Digibyte needs to grow. I'm not for sure. I am not Nostradamus. I can't see in the future, but I think it might be a good thing. So here's the question. Do you think that, this is the Digibyte committee, the Digibyte project itself will thrive without its founder, or do you think it will just collapse and blow away into the dust? And again, I still say it worked pretty well for Bitcoin, so maybe this is a big thing. And because this is such a big thing that he did, and he actually stepped down and goes, you know what, I'm just going to let it go. This might actually be the catalyst for me to invest in a Digibyte. And it's not like it costs a lot of money. I think Digibyte is, what are we looking at, 2 cents? So, I could buy, 10 of those, and would only be like 20 cents or whatever. So I think it might be actually a decent investment, but who knows? Maybe we'll see. Let me know what you think in the comment section, and let's move on to our last piece, which is Scam of the Day. So here's the thing. We've had these last 5 scams that just never go away. And it is perplexing to me to have YouTube, which has these fantastic algorithms that shut down videos from other creators at the drop of a hat, but yet they can't figure out that these are scams, even when I've had hundreds, if not thousands of people report these scams and say, this is a scam and this is why. But they still, are just around there. So we had a pretty good run, pretty good luck here. We started in January, shut down many scams, which helped out a lot of people not get screwed out of their money. So thanks, everybody. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to just wave the white flag for these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and just say we will, we can still report them, still try to get going, but we have to move on at some point. And this is the day we're going to move on. So I actually took a look and tried to find some other scams out there, and this is the only one that I can really find. It was actually very difficult to find a scam. And this has 616 views with 6 subscribers. And I got to tell you, I don't know if it's from things that we've done or people are just more savvy, but every comment just about is that, hey, this is a scam. So I'm happy with that. I'm pretty content. And if you want to still report this one, I'll do it myself. All you got to do is just like it, click on the 3 dots, click report, and say this is spam or misleading. Say why. It's because it's scams and fraud. Click next and just say, hey, this is a scam. Elon Musk isn't giving away Bitcoin. He only has 0.25 Bitcoin, apparently, as he says in a tweet. And report, and that's it. And how do we know it's a scam? Just to be sure, not because people down here say it's a scam, but it's an asymmetrical giveaway. It states here, if you send 0.1 Bitcoin, you'll get 0.2 back. If you send 5 Bitcoin, you'll get 10 Bitcoin back. No one's doing that. You're not special. No one likes you that much to give you that much Bitcoin. Sorry, it's just the way it is. All right, so that's it for today's video. Pretty quick. Oh, sorry, one last thing. I need to make mention. I want to say thank you to all the supporters out there. I really appreciate it. If you don't know, there's a little join button at the bottom. It looks something like that. And if you click on that, it'll give you the option to join up to Digital Asset News. Now, this is not something where like I hold something back for members only. It's kind of like a tip. And there's two different levels. First level is just a couple bucks, and I really appreciate it to everybody who's given. And then level 2 is they pay a little bit more, so I give a little shout out, which will be, I want to say thank you to the original OG, All Right Soft, first one to do it, and then myself, who else? Dave Plummer, the straight talking guy. Check out his YouTube channel, interesting stuff. Grant Sharman, and then last but not least, it is Bruce Wood. That's a good name, Bruce Wood. So I want to say thanks to everybody, really appreciate it, and that's it for that. Pretty quick, and I want to say thanks for sticking with the rants. If you like those videos, there's gonna be 2 on the left and right. And that is it for today. So thanks for watching. See ya on the next one.